Hi, I'm Jake Kouns, CEO of Risk-Based Security. Welcome to this edition of The Right Security, the show which we spend time talking with leaders and veterans in the security space, tackling the issues of the day. Welcome. Today I'm joined by Michelle Schafer. She's a partner at Merritt Group, recently promoted from what I understand and well-deserved. Michelle has over a decade of hands-on experience with marketing communication and PR, 16 plus years in security itself. I've worked with Michelle for a long time. She's got a deep knowledge and actual technical understanding across lots of different security landscapes, different disciplines. She also has a really strong media and analyst relationship. It's great the connections that she has and how she's able to bring cybersecurity folks and media together. So I'm actually really excited that we're going to cover some of this media PR topics today. It's great to have you, and I really thank you, Michelle, for joining us.
So glad to be here, Jake. And you and I go back a long time, so I'm really happy to be your guest today and talk all things cyber PR and marketing, and hopefully something that I say is useful for your viewers.
Well, I appreciate it. In some ways, I feel this is amazing to have you a little bit on the hot seat today. I get to ask you questions because typically you're organizing interviews for other people. So I think this is going to be great. So 2020, it's been a very interesting year for all of us. Maybe even more so for the cybersecurity industry, particularly in terms of marketing. I feel like the last big event that I was at was RSA. We actually were in person. Then COVID really hit, although it was kind of hitting while we were there, and then that derailed pretty much the whole events, in-person events for the year. I know for RBS we had a really solid plan of for the whole year of events we were attending, talks we were giving, and now that I'm saying it out loud, it's quite depressing if I think about it. So let's jump right in. Let's talk a little bit about virtual conferences. I just read yesterday, or I got spammed from RSA, that they've already announced that next year, 2021, which was already moved to May, is now going to be virtual. So this virtual conference stuff's going to be with us for longer than maybe we thought. So how about, what are your thoughts on virtual conferences? What are companies saying to you in regards to these virtual expo booths?
So yeah, I think it's a bit of hit or miss at this point. I am hearing from some clients and others that, it's really difficult to actually get that true face-to-face networking component. And there's so much of that we've done over the years at events like Gartner Security Summit, Black Hat, RSA. I mean, that's what people really love about these events. And the security community is so tight-knit, and we've all known each other for so long that missing that piece of it is really, really hard. But from a marketer's perspective, it's even harder, right? How do you do these trade show booths virtually, get people to come to the booth and actually have these conversations? I personally got a bit of a taste of all of this from Black Hat Virtual this year. And I gotta say, kudos to the Black Hat team for doing their best in a really tough situation. I think they still had over 20,000 attendees at the event. And I still felt bits and pieces of the community aspect, even being able to be in chat rooms and saying hi to some of the folks that I've known for a very long time. I thought that was really kind of cool. People were waving and saying hi. And then to the very end, being part of the kind of finale where the DJ came on and there was music playing and people were saying kind of goodbye to each other. I think Black Hat did the best that they could, but did it really give the ROI that the marketers are looking for and the leads? I think it's still a mixed bag. I think it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of, looking at other components to drive leads. I mean, a lot of our clients are looking at webinars, lunch and learns, anything that's going to really educate the community on the problems that they're solving. I think those tactics are working really well. And my advice for marketers is to really look at the mix. It's paid, earned, owned, and social. All of those other avenues are out there, and they should really be looking carefully at how to take advantage of them. But I think it's going to be tough. I mean, I was sad when I heard that RSA is going to be virtual, but I understand why. Like, health, of everybody must be front and center, and and I think RSA is taking it very seriously, and they're doing the right thing by the community and the people.
I think you're spot on. It's been very interesting on my side, and I'm sure you have even more sort of view of this with everyone you work with, but how the different conferences are handling it, from already having things booked, right? You know how it is. You got to book some of these booths and tables ahead of time, and so the questioning now, I spent this kind of money and expecting these kind of folks to come by, and things are changing. And some events are giving you the opportunity for a refund. Some are saying, oh no, you can only roll it over. I mean, it's been eye-opening how the different conferences are handling it. Some much better than others, I would definitely say. So for a company that's considering what to do, are you suggesting that they should try to participate in these virtual conferences, or are you kind of wondering if they should spend money other places?
So again, it's a bit of a mixed bag, because I feel like they kind of need to be there, right? If you're not attending some of these larger virtual conferences, and I am referring to an RSA or a Black Hat, you do look like you're sort of missing. But there are so many other avenues to spend your marketing dollars right now. And like I said, there's a big mix out there of paid, earned, social, that you can divert your funds to, where you may get better ROI. Because if lead generation is your main goal, you could do a lot of other things than putting thousands and thousands of dollars into these events, and see that true ROI faster. If you do it the right way. And so a lot of our clients are looking at, everything from paid social to, reinvigorating their content marketing programs. They are doing these webinars, like I said, but they're really looking at it more holistically. And again, diverting some of those event dollars into other marketing avenues that are going to get them what they want. And for each of, our clients, it's a different end game. Some of them just really want a lot of viral buzz, and they want to build their brand awareness, especially if they're a startup. So they are looking at earned PR, getting out there, getting hits in Bloomberg, Dark Reading, SC Magazine, whatever it is. They want to get that earned, PR publicity out there. And some of them are looking at investing more in social programs too, and really taking any content that they're doing, any of that coverage that they're getting, amplifying it, making sure that it gets out there on LinkedIn, Twitter. They're even using Medium and LinkedIn to post blogs. So it's all that amplification of great content that we're seeing. And it's kind of a better way to get audiences, and probably a bit cheaper.
That makes sense. And you mentioned webinars. So let's talk a little bit more webinar specific. From my standpoint, and talking to a lot of other friends and companies and areas, and again, you have a much larger perspective on this, but it felt like prior to COVID in 2020, webinars were really useful and people loved them, and it was a big part of a marketing program, that you needed to have a really solid webinar program, and for leads and all those sorts of things. Now, because I feel like so many people can't go to these events, everyone is trying to get a webinar program going. And like that concept of like Zoom fatigue, right, is like real. So, what I'm hearing is that, people that are just now starting their webinar programs are a little late to the game, because I don't know, I guess the question to you is, do people really care about webinars in 2020? Are they really valuable? Should companies be putting that kind of effort into these webinar programs, given that everyone is?
So I think you're right in that folks have been doing webinars for a very long time. They're not new. There's just more of them. And I feel like there is that level of fatigue, right? We are all working from home. We are on our laptops all day, and for some of us into the evenings. And it's hard to want to sit through a full 1 hour webinar when you kind of want to get up, move around, and maybe you have other things on your plate. So I think the Zoom fatigue is a piece of it. But I would say for marketers, it's really important that you are looking at targeting the right people. So I know sometimes I have a lot of salespeople approach me vendors that want me to join their webinars. But if they actually looked more closely at my LinkedIn, they would understand that I sit on the marketing side of cybersecurity, that I'm not a core decision maker that's going to buy the next firewall or cloud solution for Merritt Group. So I feel like the targeting of these webinars is something that really does need to be improved. People need to stop, bombing folks that are not the right targets with these webinars. I think there's a frustration, and I've heard it from some CISOs that I've talked to about, the targeting being off for a lot of these marketing programs. They shouldn't be getting spammed with a lot of emails about these webinars if they're not the right fit.
So in 2016, feels like forever ago, you spoke at RSAC with Tim Wilson, and the title of the talk was "Changing the Mind of the Security Pro." And how I remember it was really around like how hype and media can actually influence and shape InfoSec priorities, right? And I believe you covered things like where security pros get their information, is it reliable? And then maybe even you dove into a little bit about how the news cycle works. I remember for years hearing engineers complaining that CISOs or management would be on an airplane back when we traveled, and they would read an article or see something on a cover of a magazine, and that was their new hot topic priority that everyone had to work on. So can you sort of reach back a little bit to 2016 and maybe give us a little recap, or maybe some of those key points that listeners that haven't had a chance to hear that talk maybe could benefit from?
Sure. So that was a talk that I did with my near and dear friend, Tim Wilson, who you guys know as the editor of Dark Reading. And our goal with that talk was to really shine a light on headlines that make news, and if they actually are helpful at the end of the day for a lot of these folks that are in the weeds, the security practitioners. And I think what we found is that a lot of the headlines, while they are important and they are informative, and it's good to stay up to speed on the latest threats and attacks and data breaches of the day, a lot of them can cause more headaches for security pros. And it adds to their already busy schedule of dealing with, alert fatigue from, false positives, their day-to-day jobs. And, does it help or hinder? And I think what we concluded is that while some of these stories are important and some of the big breaches are good to know about, some of them can be distracting at the end of the day. And, are they being covered for clicks? And so I think, we know that the journalists we work with have important jobs to do, and they need to bring this news to market, and they want to inform the security practitioners all the way from the SOC up to the CISO, and the general consumer audiences, which I think has been a really good evolution. A lot more people understand cyber today because it is being covered by, the CNBCs, the Fox News, the Bloomberg. So we've made some good progress there in educating the community. But I still think that, we need to focus in on what's valuable to the practitioner and what's going to help them do their jobs better. And so I think in the last 4 years, I've seen a lot more, what I call thought leadership content, which is, how-to articles that can help people do their jobs better. A perfect example, and, again, I love Dark Reading, but they've done a great job of doing guest blogs. And a lot of my clients have written really good stories and blogs that are up there, and they tell the practitioners practical advice on how to do their jobs better, news that they can actually use that doesn't cause a lot of, noise in a market that's already so noisy and so filled with, major headlines. It really is tough to cut through the hype still, but I really think if you look at it from what's valuable, what can a practitioner use, I think you're going to be better off.
Yeah, I love that you sort of, said exactly, we're in 2020 and some things are the same, but a lot of things have changed dramatically, right? So is there something else that you think, COVID and the media landscape has sort of changed how reporters are covering cybersecurity and those kinds of things? Or is it kind of like still hot markets drive a lot of the news? I know you've said that a few times in the past.
So I think COVID did a few things, right? We all got into this work from home atmosphere very quickly. and we're all in it together. And so the first thing that I told my team when we got back from RSA was, look, we need to be extra cautious on how we reach out to our journalist friends right now, because you don't know who's got a child at home that they're taking care of while they're trying to work a full-time job, or a sick parent that they need to care for unexpectedly due to COVID. So first and foremost, I told my team, let's be careful, be cautious, but let our reporter friends know that we're here for them and we're here to help them. And, we want to work with them in the best way possible. So really, a week after RSA, we were sending notes to our friendly reporters, and we said, look, checking in on you, want to make sure everything's okay. We don't want to bombard you with news right now if it doesn't matter. How can we best work with you? And we got a great response. A lot of our journalist friends appreciated the fact that we reached out to check in on them in a very human way, because again, we're all in this together. And I feel like that was a really good way to let them know, hey, we're here for each other, we're in it together, and we care about you. And so we got a great response. From there, we ended up, asking them more specifics. If you are going to be covering the news cycle in the next couple months, what are you looking for? And a lot of them resoundingly came back and said, we want to talk about COVID phishing related scams, new threats related to COVID. That was obviously driving all of the headlines, and it still is to some extent, but they wanted data-driven stories. And so we went back and talked to our clients about what they had. And in some cases, we were able to come back with really good data to help them drive news. And I think they appreciated that. Fast forward, here we are 8 months later, we're still seeing a lot of that. Data-driven stories continue to drive the news headlines. Threat of the day stories are still very big. New funding is out there. In fact, today we had a client announce a very large funding round. So we're still seeing, a lot more money being dumped into the market, which is great. Now, I always say that cyber is going to be one of these hockey stick markets. It just continues to grow year after year. So I think what gives me hope is that there's still a lot of innovation out there. And I do think that the media landscape is evolving with what's happening with COVID. They're also looking at the work from home and the technologies that can help with that, everything from cloud security and authentication to SASE, and everything in between. They're looking at all of those stories and how they can really get that information out to readers, how to protect your home network, IoT, and everything else. So I think, the media's done a great job of covering it, and we continue to try to give them the best stories. I think my advice to PR pros and media folks out there, again, it's just make sure that what you're giving the reporter is super valuable, and it's not saying the same thing as everybody else, especially if you're going to chase a breach of the day story. So many of the times we see these stories break and executives want to comment, but they need to really add value. And if they know something about the breach or that piece of malware that maybe is an insider's viewpoint, sure, share it. But if you're repeating everything else that everyone else is saying, it's not going to add value. And in fact, it can jeopardize that relationship with the journalist.
I think that's great feedback. I have long heard and seen some reporters post their inbox with PR pros chasing the hot topic with the same kind of, our executive wants to comment on this, and I know they don't like that. So that's great to hear. All right, I'm going to ask. Let's go down a question here that I don't know, maybe a little tough one. I don't know how you want to answer it, but what are your thoughts now with this whole pay to play, right? So there's been lots of theories from analysts, and whether you get, features and coverage, you have to, pay up for the subscription and things like that. So that's been sort of kind of a pain for a lot of people, that some people want to say, yes, it's true. Some don't say it's true. But what are your thoughts now with pay to play when it gets to marketing, right? Like these guest blog posts where you're not really a guest because they asked you, you're a guest because you paid good money for it. And maybe, if you don't mind, if you can weave in a little bit specifically around product coverage, right? I think you and I talked back in the day, if you had a product or something early on in the cyber world, it was easy to get coverage of that. But now trying to get coverage of a product or a release is tough. So I know it's a little bit of a tricky question for you, but what can you share with us?
Sure. Well, let me start with the kind of pay to play sort of analyst model first. So a lot of times we work with startups that have limited marketing dollars, and they are coming to us and asking us the question, should we be investing this soon in a very expensive, paid relationship with one of the top analyst firms? And almost always I tell them no. And the reason is, there's a lot of other ways to divert those funds to other marketing programs that are going to get them that buzz. Now, I'm not saying don't interact with them, because you can get usually 2, maybe 3 free briefings with those analysts per year where you don't actually have to put that money forward. Eventually, you're going to have to pay as you get to your A and your B rounds of funding, and you just generally have more marketing dollars. But my advice is to engage them, have great conversations, get on their radar, but really choose selectively where you're going to invest those dollars when it comes to the analyst. And when you're ready, then I think you pull the trigger, and hopefully it pays off. I know some of my clients in the past had no paid engagement with a Gartner, for example, and still got in the cool vendors. And that's great. That's huge. Those are great accolades. And eventually that built into a paid engagement later on. So there are things that you can do on the front end with the analysts to get them engaged in the front end, and then nurture the relationship, and then move to the paid model later on. When it comes to these pay to play kind of product listings and product coverage, there are some of those that are out there. And product coverage just generally is difficult to get. I think the media landscape changed dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years, where we've seen that product coverage get slimmer and slimmer. There's maybe 5 or 6 reporters that I can think of offhand that will cover, really interesting, innovative product news. And that's publications from the channel side to publications like eWeek. So I really think that world is so limited. So there are some considerations to be made around getting paid coverage. And one of those avenues is potentially a paid for review. Those are out there. If you can get a great 5-star review that's something that your sales team can use to show the validation of your product, then it is a good consideration and a good probably spend of your money. But there are the other ones like SC Labs that are still out there. They're doing the unpaid reviews. You can get into the product roundups with SC Labs. That's still really great validation, so long as that you get a good score and that your product is reviewed very well. But I will say overall, especially in the COVID landscape, we are telling our clients, you need to be looking at this mix, and paid is going to be part of it. And you're going to need to look at how and where you want to invest those dollars for the best ROI. Another good example is the Forbes Technology Council. So for some of our CEOs that want to get out there as a thought leader, you can pay and get 1 article per month or answer some interesting questions and be featured in Forbes. And that, for many of our clients has really paid dividends. They enjoy being in Forbes, even if it is on a paid engagement.
So Michelle, in your 2016 RSAC talk, you also talked about overhyped vulnerabilities, right? Name vulnerabilities. Even some of these vulnerabilities at the time were getting full-on marketing websites, and it felt like marketing campaigns. What are your thoughts on these name vulns? Is it still much of the same? Are you seeing any differences here recently?
So I would just say there's a lot more of them than there were 4 years ago. We continue to see a lot of really unique threats that just, again, rise to the headlines, and the journalists just really enjoy them. And again, they are helpful, I do think, in many ways for these practitioners to really understand the threats and the vulnerabilities that are out there. But yeah, they haven't really toned down much. In fact, we continue to see new interesting names that are out there. But I understand, why they're so compelling, because again, from a PR perspective, it does make our job easier to go out there with these really big vulnerabilities that the reporters, really do have to cover. If it's a big vulnerability with big impact, we just know that it's going to drive the lines, and it's going to drive that coverage for clients. So we just continue to see more and more of it. It's just kind of part of the overall PR package when we're talking to clients. You know, do you have a threat research team? If so, can we leverage them? Can they find anything interesting? And can we get out there and talk about it? You know, and again, it's to educate the market, and it also drives headlines and drives that awareness and that credibility for our clients.
I know from a researcher standpoint, media can be super frustrating, right? I've seen some amazing research that gets almost no attention, no love. And then on the flip side, some kind of pretty lame things that get all kinds of coverage. Do you have any thoughts for researchers themselves on maybe how they can better communicate or let people know about their work?
So I do believe that a really well-written threat research blog that can be shared with the journalist, even if it's straight from, you know, that researcher to the journalist, I almost think they appreciate that more by cutting out the PR middlemen sometimes. I think, you know, engaging that journalist, if you've got something really interesting and unique, is a great idea. And I think it enables that researcher to outline whatever the threat or the vulnerability was that they discovered in a way that's digestible for a reporter. My advice, though, is to make sure it's not too in the weeds and it's not too technical, and that at least in an email that you send to the journalist, that you can hit the 3 or 4 big points, the key takeaways on why that reporter should actually care and write about the story. But there's a lot of competition out there. I mean, again, so many of these marketing teams, you know, go out with these threat research reports. It makes it really hard for the journalists to weigh which ones they should cover that have big impact and that their readers need to know about, and which ones they just don't see as being as impactful and they can't cover. Because remember, a lot of these journalists have to write 4, 5, 6 big stories a day, and they have to pick and choose their battles. And it's hard as a PR pro to get told no, but we have to understand the position that they're in. They're bombarded with so many vicious news cycles that they can only cover so much in an 8-hour day.
Social media, it's been you know, a lightning rod this year in 2020 in many ways. Do you think social media is still an effective way for companies to get their messages out? And are there sort of any thoughts on, you know, the specific social media channels that you think you can share with us?
So I always think about the security community on social, and it's where a lot of the influencers like yourself spend time, and there's great conversations that are happening back and forth and the sharing of information. So I firmly believe that social is still a great avenue to build connections, to grow connections, to have that dialogue, and it builds up these so-called influencers in the eyes of the journalists. And I tend to see a lot of the journalists interacting with them and asking them for their thoughts on these breaches. And a lot of great conversation can happen on social. But if you're looking at social to drive leads, that is not really your best bet. Organic social is not going to get you a whole lot of lead generation. So therefore, we are recommending, looking at different avenues like paid social, where you have a great piece of content and you put some dollars behind it to have it targeted and put really right in front of those audiences you want to be in. So whether it's LinkedIn, Medium, Facebook, etc., it gets that great piece of content more directly in front of the targeted audience. But I do feel like social does have such a great influence on our community, and I love to see the information sharing that happens amongst these influencers. And I've noticed a lot of new faces that have come on the scene in the last, I'd say 5 to 7 to 8 years. Top, well-respected, threat researcher types, women that have really, risen to be leaders in our industry, and they have great, great followings on social. So I really feel strongly that for the security community, social is just a great, great channel.
So I want to pop back to the media outlets for a second. This sort of concept of exclusives. Can you maybe give a little, explanation of, what the exclusive process is for getting your message out? And do media outlets still want these exclusive topics and articles and things?
So the short answer is yes, absolutely. The media outlets love exclusives, and if there's a great story that is exclusive worthy, we absolutely look at that as an avenue with our clients. And again, if it depends on the client's needs and goals. If they want a huge story in the New York Times or Bloomberg or Wired, we know we're going to have to give it as an exclusive. That is just the way of the world. But let me take a step back and define what an exclusive is. So there are a lot of great stories that are out there that as PR professionals, we have to pitch out to journalists. And there are some stories that are more important than others, and that we want to get more of that tier one, huge feature-rich coverage on. So taking a pitch exclusively to one journalist to get that larger story is a way of saying, hey, I want to work with you directly on this big feature piece. I'm not going to go to 20 other reporters. I'm going to you, and I'm asking for you to cover the news, and I will give you everything you need to write a very big, large, feature-rich story. I'll put you in touch with, the researcher, the VC, whatever it is, and I'm going to package up a great story for you. And I've done some exclusives in my day, and we continue to counsel our clients on it. It really does come down to the goal. Do you want far and wide coverage, or do you want one really great piece of that tier one coverage and maybe a business press outlet that would really make your client happy? And so it is about having those conversations once you have that juicy piece of news or threat research or a survey, and saying, which direction should we go? And we do counsel our clients on it. I remember working with a client, several years back, I think it was 2013, on a big threat research report, and we did give it to the New York Times. And the day that the news broke, it was, a great feature story, but it also was hard for me personally, because there were some reporters that I worked with that were not too happy with me for giving that particular story to one other journalist. They ended up writing, which was great, but it also can be very sticky with the relationships you already have with journalists. So you really have to think it through carefully and really determine, what the end goal is, what you really want, and if you want to get that one big story, if you want to have a level playing field and get 10 great stories.
What about if a company decides, all right, we're not going to do the exclusive thing, but we want to pick a few outlets and pre-pitch them with like an embargo? Are you feeling that giving journalists a chance to understand and write about it and getting ready, or are you maybe more advising just post your blog and then push journalists to read what you wrote? Any thoughts there?
So that is actually a really great question, and something I talk to my team and my clients about all the time. In this day and age, you cannot expect to get coverage the day that you put a press release out just based on the news alone or the blog alone. You really have to consider the news cycles and what these reporters are up against. Like I said, some of them have to do, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories a day. So they have to plan those stories, days, weeks in advance. And the more time that you can give them, of giving them that embargoed news, that gives them more time to plan and put that story together, so that when your news breaks, they've got the story already written, ready to go. They just have to post it. So absolutely, folks should be doing the embargoed pitching as much as possible on important news for their clients. Otherwise, your chances get slimmer and slimmer of getting coverage the day of.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, I think you have shared all kinds of knowledge that can be helpful, from large corporations to startups. And I know you have done a fair amount of help mentoring startups and folks in the security industry. So let's talk a little bit about startups for a second. Let's say someone's watching this and they're looking at this and they're hearing everything, and they're thinking to themselves, so what do you say to a startup that says, this is great and all, Michelle, but we're not massive, we're not megacorp, I don't have a dedicated marketing team that can do all these things, and I sure can't afford to hire you yet. What do you say to them? Because marketing is so critical, right? If I look back on risk-based security, that's one of the things I try to tell people all the time. People knew us and they knew of us, but we weren't really marketing the company. We thought just do great work, and if you build it and you have great data, people will find you and they'll come. And I think that's one of the big learnings of, no, you actually have to get out there and tell people what's going on. So what do you say to these startups that feel like they're just going to focus on the product and not marketing?
Right. So again, limited marketing dollars, you got to put it to the right, PR or marketing programs. In my experience, the first thing that a startup most often needs is really solid messaging. And I say that because I've seen a lot of startups that didn't have help with their messaging, where executives have gone out and they've gotten coverage and they're not on the same page. It's a mixed message. You don't understand what they do because you've read 3 different articles with 3 different executives quoted, and they're not saying from the same Bible. So I feel like messaging is probably the number one thing as a startup that you should invest in, and bringing in, somebody that is seasoned, that knows the broader market is really, crucial to that whole process, because, you are not the only one that has this product or technology. As a CEO of a startup, there are definitely competitors out there that are saying the same thing, that are messaging around the same thing. So you really have to dig deep with your marketing team to figure out how can you differentiate what it is that you're doing and you're saying to stand out from a very large, noisy cyber market where everybody sounds the same. So I always tell my startup, prospects that come to Merritt Group, have you done messaging? Because if not, that's the first thing we need to put some energy towards. And once you have the messaging, that feeds the rest of the program. So it's everything that you put on your website to, how your salespeople are going to pitch your solutions. It helps with building out collateral like data sheets. It can direct how you're going to take your blog programs, what you put on your social. So messaging truly to me is the Bible and the heart of a marketing program, and where you should really start and invest your time and your energy. And then once you have it, make sure everybody knows it in the firm so that people aren't out there confusing the message about who you are, what you do, and how you're really unique and different.
So if we look at media and marketing as maybe the driver of the security industry, like we've talked about in the past, what's up next for the security industry? What are we going to have to focus on as you see it?
Well, there's a lot. Again, the cyber industry never sleeps, and I joke when I say that, but it's true. There has never been a busier, I think, market or industry to be in. It's just chock full of exciting stories, new innovations, new technologies. When I look ahead to where it's going, yes, there's the stories around work from home and COVID related scams and threats. But I think a lot of stories need to be told around topics like 5G and even 6G. Where is that technology going, and where does security fall into that? I think that that's really an interesting angle right now that some journalists have already written about, but there's more, I think, that we need to know. And then just looking at, the larger kind of seismic trends, what's going to happen with the cloud. And those stories seem to resonate a lot right now with, cloud security, SASE, CASB, and all of these interesting technologies, and how can they really help secure the end user and, the enterprise network, which again, has no perimeter. So I think, there's a lot to be said still around kind of, how do you secure these COVID networks that we're all living in day to day now. So more to come on that. Certainly predictions, we're in the middle of it right now. We're talking to clients about what they see in the crystal ball for 2021 and beyond. And and I think that those are stories we're going to see play from now all the way through January. People are going to make these sort of predictions on what's going to happen with security, where it's going to go, what technologies are going to be unique, and what stories we're going to see more of. So I think it's just, there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of kind of big stories that are out there. I think there's something for everyone to probably say, but again, it comes back to, can you add value to the conversation? Are you saying something unique? Are you saying something different? I think the journalists these days appreciate that, and they appreciate new voices in the market. So new people that are just, starting their careers that, have interesting things to say. I think it's right for new voices to get in there and start owning some of the conversation.
It's funny you brought up the prediction stuff, because I personally cringe at those every year. And I've been working on a talk, I think for, maybe 3-4 years now, where we've been tracking all the predictions and then tracking to decide has it come true or not, so we could sort of come back and say, pay no attention to these predictions, or they're actually useful. So you're spot on. We're into that time of year now where we're going to see all these predictions coming out. It's going to be interesting reading. All right, so anything else on your mind, or maybe final thoughts, advice for PR pros?
Yeah, I would say one topic I did not touch on, and I know it's probably on everybody's mind, is election security and election hacking. I think there was a lot of hype leading up to the election. We thought that there were going to be massive, threats and vulnerabilities, and the election was going to get hacked. And I think now we're seeing that that wasn't necessarily true. I know it's a difficult time, and we're still trying to figure things out with the next administration. And that will be a focus for the next couple of weeks, months, as Biden comes into office. What should the new administration be focusing on when it comes to cyber? So I think that there are a lot of opportunities for PR folks like myself to get into that conversation.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being with us today. For everyone watching, Michelle has been my go-to resource for all things cyber, PR, marketing for years. I'm surprised she hasn't been sick of me asking her questions all the time. But if you have any marketing needs, if you have just any questions, she's an amazing person. I'm sure she's willing to chat with you. I'd highly recommend reaching out to Michelle, or actually even check out Merritt Group's website. They've got some amazing things they can help you with. So, Michelle, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much, Jake. This was a lot of fun.